Hey there, my name's Kester from Active Health Clinic, and I thought I would just do a quick video regarding managing pain and I suppose shifting our mindset when it comes to persistent pain, and specifically kind of pain related to sensitization. So obviously this isn't referring to pain that is due to an injury or tissue damage, like an acute issue, because very different scenario. Obviously pain is protective and pain does give us valuable information at times, but this is specifically referring to people who have especially like chronic regional pain syndrome. So pain that is kind of isolated to an area that is persistent and that is not because of structural tissue damage. It's kind of ongoing, chronic, and I guess inappropriate pain. It's not because of, doesn't have a relationship to damage to the body. So a really useful approach, a very complicated one, but a useful approach is, when it comes to this kind of issue, is trying to shift our focus away from removal or fixing of that negative sensation, so the pain, and actually trying to move towards building tolerance to that sensation. And then in the end, over time, the idea is that at the very least, that sensation, that pain has less of a control over your life. But even potentially over time, that the sensation itself may start to dim as you start to kind of reprogram and build safety through, like, with your body and those symptoms. So obviously, or not obviously, potentially, but pain is really closely linked with fear and threat, especially fear and threat like observed by the brain. Therefore, if we can work on removing this emotional component out of the equation, potentially our nervous system finds there is a reduced need for that pain, because I suppose it's the fear and the threat that often feeds and perpetuates a symptom like that. First off, we need to make sure that we're doing what we can to pace our activity. That's really important. If we're not pacing our activity and our nervous system's really wound up and agitated and hypervigilant through overexertion and stress, it's really hard to make progress in this specific area. We need to try and do that first, which involves respecting our window of tolerance in terms of activity. You know, make sure we're well hydrated and fuel where we're giving our body nourishment. You know, potentially engaging in safe movement if possible and tolerable at that level. You know, doing our best to manage stress, and that we're not in a symptom flare-up. That's really important. We're not going to do this in a symptom flare-up, because I suppose leaning in and trying to tolerate excruciating, really loud pain is just going to fuel more dysregulation and potentially more symptoms. But the idea here is, and specifically for someone with an experience of pain that seems to come up with a certain form of activity in a certain area of their body when they're doing something, the natural instinct here is to completely avoid that activity altogether, I guess, to avoid that sensation. And potentially, you know, by altering lifestyle, that can be done effectively. Sometimes, however, life requires us to do certain things, and it might be really hard to just completely avoid an activity or a situation because it flares our pain up. And if we're really keen to try and dim that response by our body, moving away from just avoidance to thinking about building safety and a tolerance for that experience, that pain or that activity, can start to increase our tolerance for that unpleasant sensation. Then maybe it doesn't have such a control over our life, and then we can reintroduce those things that maybe we haven't been able to do. Obviously, pain exists in response to an activity because your nervous system and your brain is part of that too, has decided that it's dangerous and that you need to be informed of that. The idea here is, by repeated exposure in tolerant doses to that activity and to that sensation, and this is really important, while reinforcing safety. So we need cues of safety while we're doing that helps kind of battle that threat that's coming from this association of your nervous system with that activity. You need things that alternatively are cueing safety, and that could be in your environment, it could be something else you're doing, you know, managing your thoughts and feelings, making sure you're already in a very regulated state. And basically just trying to, you know, in very tolerable doses, doing that activity and trying to, I guess, reprogram and create a new set of experiences that aren't causing that pain. So let's say, for example, I have you know, chronic pain in my wrist, and you know, I've done the tests and the scans, and there isn't anything structural going on. I have chronic regional pain syndrome, and potentially using a pen is really, really painful for me. And potentially for a lot of people, sometimes this isn't the case all the time, but sometimes where their pain manifests is actually closely related to an experience they had that's kind of how the sensitization occurred in the first place, and it was born out of a really stressful time. Like, let's say perhaps maybe I had a really stressful exam and there's a lot of other stuff going on in my life at the time, and maybe I got really unwell as well, and my chronic pain manifested as a severe intolerance to riding, because that was my nervous system's way of getting me away from that activity that was seen as a threat, because around that time studying and, you know, was such a stress in my life, and perhaps that's where the pain was born. And so now my nervous system is going, danger, danger, don't do this, this is dangerous. And so specifically with that, perhaps you would, rather than just avoiding riding altogether, I mean, there's ways we can get around riding in today's age, but maybe you want to get that part of your life back. The idea is, rather than just avoiding it altogether, because I suppose when you avoid it, that almost perpetuates the idea that it's dangerous, is in very tolerable doses, you practice riding and see if you can build your own tolerance to that sensation with lots of sims, and I guess create a new data set of experiences where it is safe and it isn't something to be afraid of. This obviously needs to be titrated up really slowly. If pain and distress increases rapidly, that's a clear sign to slow down. If it kind of gets to a level that you feel like you can tolerate, it might be uncomfortable, but if it gets to a level and it doesn't necessarily just keep going up and up, and you can tolerate and sit in that, then that's probably a good level. Obviously, for understandable reasons, we have a tendency, human beings, and this is in lots of different aspects of life, we move away from the uncomfortable things, and that's our brain and our body's way of keeping us safe. It's just like, that's what anxiety is. I'm scared of this thing, and so I avoid it. And sometimes when we almost lean in and move towards the thing that our brain or our nervous system is programmed to fear, obviously that's with a grain of salt. We're not going to do things that are actually going to put ourselves at risk or cause massive pain flares. And that's why it's very nuanced, and you need to figure out that level and titrate up slowly. But you can start to break down that association that is maybe an incorrect association. You know, there's no reason that if I don't have any injuries or structural damage to my wrist, that riding should cause severe pain. And so being really conscious of that and working on breaking down that association and building that tolerance over time can be really useful. Thank you.